The room you are sitting in right now is not solid. The chair beneath you is 99.9% empty space. The walls around you are held together not by matter, but by invisible electromagnetic fields pushing against each other. And the moment you opened your eyes this morning, your brain invented a version of reality that doesn't actually exist. Tonight we explore the physics that proves everything you think is real isn't. Get comfortable. Let your body sink into the surface beneath you. Because what you are about to discover will make the room around you feel completely different by the time you fall asleep. The moment a room stops feeling familiar. Imagine sitting quietly in a room you have inhabited for years. You know the exact grain of the wooden floorboards, the precise angle where the ceiling meets the plaster, and how the afternoon sun cuts across the rug at 4 o'clock. Everything is deeply catalogued in your mind as safe, permanent, and predictable. But occasionally, if you sit perfectly still as the twilight fades, a subtle shift occurs. The brain, which usually operates on a high-speed system of sensory shortcuts, temporarily pauses its predictive software. Suddenly, you are no longer looking at a familiar sanctuary. You are looking at raw, uninterpreted space. Objects lose their names. The desk is no longer a piece of office furniture, but a dense, dark geometric silhouette pushing against the atmosphere. The walls seem to withdraw into an immense, unmeasurable distance. Psychologists call this temporary suspension of recognition a processing lapse, a rare moment where the mind stops projecting your past memories onto your present environment. For a few brief seconds, you are forced to see reality exactly as it is, stripped entirely of human labels. It is a quiet reminder that our sense of familiarity is not an inherent trait of the physical world, but a fragile layer of paint your brain applies to the unknown every morning. When that paint dries thin, the true, alien nature of space peeks through. It can feel as though the reality of the room has started to wobble, detached from its historical anchors. Yet as the initial surprise of this experience fades, a profound sense of stillness takes its place. The room does not actually need your recognition to exist. It rests perfectly well in its own silent identity, unbothered by definitions. As you listen to the quiet house around you tonight, let the need to label, organize, and categorize the world fade away. The objects in the dark are at peace, untethered from their names. The corners of the room dissolve into soft, ambiguous shadows, inviting you to let go of the day's rigid structures. You do not need to manage or monitor the space around you anymore. It is stable, it is silent, and it is perfectly content to hold you safely as you drift slowly into rest. Why shadows sometimes feel more real than objects. We are taught from childhood to believe that solid matter is the true currency of reality, while shadows are merely empty absences of light. We treat the physical object, a heavy chair, a stone wall, a resting hand, as the primary truth, and its dark silhouette as a secondary, unimportant consequence. But from a purely evolutionary and sensory perspective, your brain often processes a shadow with a deeper, more primitive urgency than the object that cast it. A solid object reflects light into your eyes, revealing textures, complex colors, and shifting highlights that require an immense amount of cognitive computing power to decode. A shadow, however, completely strips away this superficiality. It presents the analytical mind with pure, unadulterated geometry. It is a direct, high-contrast boundary line cutting across space, telling you exactly where one physical reality ends and another begins. In the low light of an evening room, an object can easily blend into its background, its colors muted and confused by the dark. But its shadow stretches out across the floor, elongated and sharp, tracing the contours of the terrain and climbing the walls like a living mapping system. The shadow becomes an exaggeration of form, making a simple curtain look like a towering column or a small plant look like a sprawling forest. It reveals the otherwise invisible topography of your surroundings, showing you the exact curves of the surfaces it passes over. In this way, the shadow does not obscure reality, it translates it, acting as a quiet bridge between light and structure. As the night deepens, the boundaries between the solid object and its silhouette begin to blur into a single, cohesive darkness. The sharp lines of the daytime world soften into gentle gradients of gray and black. There is no longer a pressing need to distinguish between what is solid and what is empty, what is substance and what is space. Both are simply resting parts of the same quiet landscape. The shadows expand peacefully to fill the room, wrapping everything in a uniform, protective blanket of stillness. Let your eyes close against the dark, trusting that the shapes of the world are settling into their nightly rest, free from the weight of their forms. The physics of a second that feels too long. Everyone has experienced a moment where time suddenly stretches like glass. You look up at a clock, and the second hand seems to freeze mid-tick, hanging suspended in the air for an impossibly long duration before finally dropping down to the next marker. Or perhaps you experience a sudden startle, and the next few seconds expand dramatically, allowing you to notice the micro-movements of dust in the air or the exact inflection of a distant sound. This stretching is not a mechanical failure of the universe, but an extraordinary adaptation of human consciousness. When your brain is confronted with an unexpected stimulus or a sudden shift in attention, it enters a state of hyperawareness. To protect you, the mind drastically increases the rate at which it processes incoming sensory data. It begins taking a massive number of mental snapshots per second, far more than its standard baseline speed. Because your brain has captured so much internal information during that brief window, when it reviews the experience an instant later, it concludes that the event must have lasted much longer than it actually did. You did not actually slow down the mechanical clock on the wall. You simply packed more living into a single tick of the universe. It is proof that a second is not a rigid, unyielding box of time, but a flexible accordion that expands and contracts based entirely on the depth of your focus. Time, in its truest psychological form, is completely elastic. When the mind is quiet and the external world becomes predictable, the brain drops its snapshot rate to a slow, gentle pulse, allowing hours to slip by like water. Tonight, there are no emergencies to prepare for and no unexpected events to analyze. Your brain can safely turn down its processing speed. The snapshots can become fewer, farther apart, and incredibly soft. A single second no longer needs to hold a mountain of data or anxiety. It can just be an empty, peaceful breath of air. Let the ticks of the clock become distant and completely meaningless as your consciousness stretches out, winding down into a slow, effortless rhythm of rest. How your brain builds reality from missing pieces. Your eyes are often praised as biological cameras, perfectly capturing the world in real time. But a closer look at the physics of sight reveals a startling gap in this description. At the back of each eye, where the optic nerve connects to the retina, there is a physical zone entirely devoid of light-detecting photoreceptors. This is your blind spot, a literal hole in your sensory field. If your brain simply passed along raw data, you would navigate life with two permanent, empty black voids floating right in the middle of your vision. Yet as you look around your room tonight, you do not see any holes or blank patches. The space appears completely seamless. This is because your brain is not merely a passive recorder. It is an active editor and a masterful storyteller. The moment incoming data hits a blank spot, your subconscious mind instantly surveys the surrounding textures, colors, and lighting patterns. It then runs a high-speed statistical prediction, painting over the void with what it calculates should be there. If you are looking at a blank wall, it fills the gap with plaster. If you are looking at a forest, it seamlessly weaves in virtual leaves. This mechanism exposes a profound truth about human consciousness. Much of what we confidently call reality is a beautifully constructed simulation, built out of calculated guesses and missing pieces. Your mind fills in the gaps of existence so rapidly that you never notice the fabrication taking place. Tonight, there is no need to actively construct or interpret the world. You can safely step down from the task of filling in the blanks. Let the details you cannot see fade into the quiet background of the evening. Your mind doesn't need to predict, analyze, or complete any unfinished pictures right now. The universe is perfectly capable of holding itself together without your continuous attention. Let your thoughts soften into the natural, unverified space of the dark, and allow yourself to gently drift into a deep, uninterrupted rest. Why empty space still has something in it. We naturally think of a vacuum as the absolute definition of nothingness, a completely sterile void where all matter, light, and energy have been thoroughly scraped away. We imagine that if we empty a chamber of every single atom, what remains is a state of pure, unblemished silence. But quantum physics has revealed that the universe fundamentally abhors a true vacuum. Even if you travel to the deepest, darkest pockets of intergalactic space, miles away from the nearest star, the cosmic void is never truly empty. It is humming with an invisible, restless energy. According to the laws of quantum mechanics, empty space is actually a violent, bubbling sea of potential. Due to the fundamental law of uncertainty, energy fields can never sit perfectly still at an absolute zero baseline. Instead, the void continuously fluctuates, spontaneously boiling with activity. Out of nothingness, pairs of virtual particles are constantly popping into existence. They flash into reality, interact for an unimaginably brief fraction of a second, and then instantly collide and annihilate one another, returning their borrowed energy back to the vacuum. This means that space is not an empty stage where physics happens. Space is the physics. The stillness of the void is a grand illusion created by trillions of microscopic actions, canceling each other out in perfect, rhythmic balance. Tonight, you can lean into the true lesson of the vacuum. Real stillness is not about achieving an unnatural, forced absence of thought or a perfectly empty mind. Just like the cosmic void, your mind can possess a quiet baseline energy while remaining profoundly at peace. You do not need to fight to clear away every stray memory or passing sensation from your day. Let those tiny, virtual thoughts flash and fade in the background without your intervention. Allow your consciousness to settle into its own deep, self-sustaining baseline, resting comfortably in the quiet, supportive vacuum of the night. The strange weight of pure attention. In our everyday experience, looking at something feels like a completely passive act. When you open your eyes to look at a book, a candle flame, or a sleeping pet, it feels as though light simply bounces off the object and floats effortlessly into your eyes. You assume that your awareness is a ghost in the machine, an invisible observer that can watch the physical world unfold without ever leaving a footprint or disturbing a single atom. But when physics descends to the microscopic quantum level, this boundary between the observer and the observed completely shatters. In the famous experiments of modern physics, scientists discovered that when a subatomic particle is left completely alone, it behaves like a wave of pure potential, spreading out and existing in multiple places at the exact same time. However, the absolute moment a measurement device or a conscious observer attempts to watch that particle, its behavior shifts instantly. The wave of possibilities collapses into a single, localized point of solid reality. The act of looking literally forces the universe to make a definitive choice. Attention is not a passive mirror. It carries a strange, undeniable weight. To focus on something is to actively interact with the fabric of reality, anchoring the fluid potentials of nature into a fixed, concrete state. Think of how much weight your attention has carried throughout the course of this long day. You have spent hours focusing, choosing, observing, and holding the complex pieces of your life into place through sheer mental effort. But tonight, the quantum world offers you a beautiful release. You can finally withdraw the weight of your observation. By letting go of your focus, you allow the rigid, concrete world to soften back into a relaxed sea of pure, unstructured potential. You no longer need to hold anything in place. Let your attention dissolve, allowing your mind to release its grasp on reality and wander freely into the soft, unobserved landscape of sleep. Why the same place feels different at night. If you walk through your home at noon, the environment feels entirely absolute. The hallway is a clear conduit of light, the kitchen table is a functional anchor of daily routine, and every object stands sharply defined in the crisp certainty of daytime. But if you walk through that exact same house at midnight, the entire psychological geography shifts. The physical dimensions of the architecture have not changed by a single millimeter, yet the space feels entirely foreign, vast, and laden with a completely different emotional frequency. This profound transformation occurs because daylight encourages your brain to focus almost entirely on outward utility. The sun illuminates the world in high definition, telling you exactly what objects are, how to use them, and where you need to go next. The daytime mind is a frantic coordinator of tasks, but when the sun dips far below the horizon and the world goes quiet, your brain switches from an outward utility mode to an inward reflective mode. In the low light of evening, the eyes can no longer rely on high-speed visual shortcuts. The mind must slow down, forced to navigate using soft contours, deep shadows, and subtle acoustic cues. Deprived of its frantic daytime tasks, your consciousness expands to fill the silence. The familiar corners of your room are no longer just utilitarian spaces. They become quiet, safe sanctuaries that invite introspection. The night strips away the demanding pressures of performance and routine, leaving only the raw, peaceful essence of your environment. Tonight, welcome this shift in geography. The world has intentionally changed its face to let you know that your work for the day is officially done. The sun has cleared the stage, the house has settled into its bones, and the space around you is actively inviting you to rest. You can safely let go of your daytime identity, matching the deep, effortless stillness of your room as you drift into a peaceful sleep. How motion changes the way reality arrives. We naturally assume that the physical world sits still while we move through it, like a traveler walking past fixed storefronts on a quiet street. We imagine that if an event occurs, a light flashing, a bell ringing, a star exploding, it happens at a single, absolute coordinate in space and time, arriving at everyone's awareness simultaneously regardless of their movement. But Albert Einstein's theories of relativity shattered this comfortable assumption, revealing that your speed and direction actively alter the way reality itself unfolds around you. When you are completely stationary, the light waves, acoustic vibrations, and cosmic information of the universe wash over you at a standard, balanced baseline frequency. But the absolute moment you begin to move forward through space, you are no longer a passive observer. By moving toward incoming signals, you artificially compress the space in front of you, forcing the waves of information to strike your senses at an accelerated pace. Conversely, the reality trailing behind you stretches out, its waves arriving with a subtle, calculated delay. This isn't a superficial trick of human perception or a simple optical illusion. It is a fundamental distortion in the fabric of spacetime itself. For a fast-moving traveler, events that appear to happen simultaneously to a stationary observer will occur in a distinct, chronological sequence. Space contracts, distances shrink, and the cosmic clock adjusts its ticking to accommodate your momentum. The universe dynamically recalibrates its layout based entirely on your relative velocity, proving that there is no single, objective map of the physical world. Tonight, you can completely step down from the journey. Your body is perfectly still, resting against the steady architecture of your room, and your velocity has dropped to a peaceful zero. Because you have stopped moving, the universe has stopped shifting its borders to match your pace. The incoming data of the world can arrive at its slowest, most natural, and most balanced frequency. There are no distances to cross, no horizons to chase, and no landscapes to navigate. Let your mind sync with the absolute stillness of your immediate surroundings, allowing the fluid coordinates of your day to settle into a deep, unyielding rhythm of rest. Why stillness is an illusion. When you lie perfectly quiet in bed in a dark room, the sensation of stillness feels absolute. The floorboards do not vibrate, the walls remain fixed in place, and your body feels entirely anchored to a singular, unmoving point in space. It feels as though you have successfully stepped off the frantic wheel of the world and entered a sanctuary of total, uninterrupted rest. But if we scale our perspective out just a fraction, physics reveals that your current stillness is a grand, beautifully coordinated illusion. At this exact microsecond, as you rest silently under the covers, you are actually hurtling through the cosmic dark at an unimaginable speed. The planet beneath your bed is spinning on its axis at over 1,000 miles per hour, dragging the atmosphere and your room along with it. Simultaneously, the Earth is rushing forward in its massive orbit around the Sun at 67,000 miles per hour. Scale out further, and our entire solar system is spiraling around the dense center of the Milky Way galaxy at a dizzying 500,000 miles per hour. You are not stationary. You are a cosmic traveler on board a massive, accelerating planetary vessel cutting through a vast vacuum. True, physical stillness does not exist anywhere in the known universe. Every atom, every star, and every pocket of empty space is caught in a perpetual, elegant dance of momentum. Your body only feels still because everything in your immediate environment is sharing the exact same magnificent velocity, moving together in perfect harmony. Tonight, you do not need to fight to achieve an unnatural, forced state of absolute stillness in your thoughts. Your mind, just like the cosmos, is a dynamic system meant to have its own natural baseline momentum. You can allow your thoughts to drift, spin, and flow in the background without trying to lock them into a rigid, artificial freeze. Trust the silent, effortless movement of the planet to carry you through the dark hours of the night. Let go of the need to anchor yourself, and simply float along with the grand cosmic rhythm, drifting gently into a deep, restorative sleep. The secret life of ordinary light. Light is the ultimate architect of our waking lives. It streams through our windows at dawn, bounces off the objects in our rooms, and delivers the shapes, colors, and boundaries of the physical world directly to our consciousness. We treat it as a familiar, transparent utility, an invisible messenger whose only job is to illuminate the stuff we want to look at. But when you study light through the lens of fundamental physics, you find that it lives a strange, double life that defies the common rules of our everyday reality. For centuries, the greatest minds in science argued over a seemingly simple question: is a beam of light made of tiny, solid bullets called particles, or is it a continuous fluid wave rippling through space? The confusing answer is that light is both, and it switches its identity based entirely on whether we are paying attention. When light travels undisturbed through the dark void of a room, it behaves exactly like a wave, spreading out in all directions, overlapping with itself, and exploring every available path simultaneously. But the absolute millisecond that same light strikes a surface, a digital camera, or the human retina, its fluid nature instantly vanishes. It collapses into a single, localized packet of energy, acting like a solid particle hitting a target. Light refuses to be categorized as just one thing. It remains a ghost of pure probability until it interacts with the physical world, striking a delicate balance between structure and freedom. As you prepare for sleep tonight, you can follow the beautiful lesson of ordinary light. The sharp, high-definition glare of the daytime world is fading away, and your mind no longer needs to act like a solid, hyper-focused particle. You can allow your consciousness to soften, expanding outward like a gentle, unobserved wave. Let your thoughts lose their hard, rigid boundaries, overlapping with memories and drifting through possibilities without any forced direction. You do not need to strike any targets or process any heavy information right now. Let the light in your mind dim into a soft, restful twilight, and allow your awareness to dissolve peacefully into the quiet, fluid sea of sleep. Why time does not move at the same speed everywhere. We treat time as the ultimate universal constant, an invisible, unyielding river flowing at an identical, immutable pace across every corner of existence. We firmly believe that a second ticking away on a watch in your bedroom matches a second on a distant planet, or a second passing near the edge of a massive star. We rely on this absolute synchronicity to organize our lives, our histories, and our collective understanding of reality. But Albert Einstein completely dismantled this ancient assumption with his theory of general relativity, proving that time is not a fixed background track, but a fluid fabric that actively bends, stretches, and slows down depending on the presence of mass and gravity. According to the laws of physics, gravity does not merely pull on physical objects, it actively warps the geometric coordinates of spacetime itself. The closer a clock is to a massive body, like a planet or a star, the more tightly the fabric of time is compressed. This distortion forces the intervals between the clock's ticks to stretch out. This means that a clock placed on the ground floor of a building will tick slightly slower than an identical clock kept in the penthouse, simply because it sits closer to the intense gravitational pull of the Earth. While this microscopic difference is completely imperceptible to human senses, it is a definitive physical reality. Time moves slower at your feet than it does at your head. Tonight, you can completely release yourself from the artificial tyranny of uniform time. The mechanical schedules of your daytime life are entirely human inventions, built on the false premise of an absolute, unyielding clock. In reality, your relationship with time is perfectly unique, shifting gently with your position and your rest. As you lie perfectly still in the low light of your room, there is no need to track the passing hours or synchronize yourself with the frantic pace of the outside world. Let the global clock dissolve into the background. Your personal time is slowing down, settling into a deep, unhurried, and perfectly restorative evening rhythm. The curious delay between event and experience. When you sit in a dark room and look at a candle flame flickering across from you, or when you listen to the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the wall, it feels as though you are experiencing the present moment in absolute real time. You trust that your consciousness is a window showing you the world exactly as it happens, with zero delay between the physical occurrence and your internal awareness. But when we look at the biology and physics of human perception, science reveals that you do not live in the actual present. You are navigating life inside a meticulously constructed tape delay of reality. This delay exists because information takes a measurable amount of time to travel through space and be processed by your body. When an event happens, light photons must bounce off the object and travel to your eyes, while acoustic waves must ripple through the air to reach your ears. Once these signals strike your sense organs, they are converted into electrical pulses that travel slowly along your nervous system to the brain. Because your brain receives different inputs at slightly different times, light arrives significantly faster than sound. It must intentionally hold all incoming data in a temporary storage buffer. It pauses the signals, synchronizes them, and weaves them together into a single, unified experience, producing a delay of roughly 80 milliseconds. You are effectively living in the past, viewing a beautifully edited replay of the world after the events have already concluded. Consciousness is a historical document that your brain carefully curates to make the universe appear seamless and organized. Tonight, you can finally retire from the heavy work of editing and synchronizing the world. Your brain has spent the entire day frantically managing this internal delay, constantly aligning sights, sounds, and actions to keep your perception perfectly stable. Now the room is quiet, the lights are low, and there are no incoming signals that require high-speed processing. You can safely let the buffer empty. You do not need to capture, organize, or interpret the current moment. Let your mind step away from the sensory stream, allowing your thoughts to dissolve into a peaceful, timeless rest. How the past keeps reaching the present. We naturally think of the past as a collection of ghosts, a landscape of departed moments that have completely vanished from the physical world, leaving behind nothing but memories and photographs. We view the present as the only true reality, a thin, sharp line moving forward through time, leaving everything else behind in the dark. But if you look up at the night sky through a window, physics reveals that the past is not dead, nor is it hidden away in the recesses of your mind. The past is a physical entity, continuously moving through space and actively colliding with the present moment. This beautiful overlap occurs because light possesses a strict, unyielding cosmic speed limit. When you look at an object, you are seeing the light that left it a fraction of a second ago. When you look at the moon, you are seeing it as it existed 1 second in the past. If you look at the sun, you are viewing light that traveled for 8 full minutes to reach your eyes. When your gaze drifts out toward the distant stars, the numbers become staggering. The light hitting your eyes from a nearby star may have left its surface during the Middle Ages, while the glow of a distant galaxy has been traveling through the void for millions of years. You are not looking at the universe as it is. You are looking at a vast, layered archaeological map of how the cosmos used to be. The sky is filled with the physical remnants of ancient histories, all arriving at your perspective simultaneously, proving that the past never truly disappears. Tonight, let this grand cosmic architecture comfort you. The events and stresses of your day are already transforming into history, rippling away from you like the light of a distant star. You do not need to hold on to them, and you do not need to fix them. They are moving out into the vast, quiet expanse of the past, leaving you completely unburdened in the stillness of your room. Let the weight of your day fade into the cosmic timeline, allowing your mind to rest peacefully in the quiet knowledge that every moment eventually finds its place in the deep, silent tapestry of time. Why clocks measure time but never contain it. We treat a clock as a literal container of time, a mechanical trap designed to capture the invisible, flowing current of the universe and slice it into orderly, manageable portions. We look at the ticking gears of a watch or the digital face of a phone and believe we are looking directly at time itself, caught in the act of passing. We give these devices immense authority over our lives, letting them dictate when we wake, when we work, when we eat, and when we sleep. But from the perspective of fundamental physics, a clock does not actually contain, hold, or touch a single drop of time. A clock is simply a machine that performs a highly regular, repetitive physical motion. In an old grandfather clock, that motion is the swinging of a heavy brass pendulum. In a modern wristwatch, it is the rapid vibration of a tiny quartz crystal subjected to an electric current. The clock merely counts its own internal movements and projects a number onto a screen or dial. It is a closed system measuring itself. Time, the actual fabric of reality that allows those gears to turn or that crystal to vibrate, remains entirely outside the mechanism, flowing silently and invisibly through the room without ever leaving a fingerprint on the machine. To believe a clock captures time is like believing a ruler captures space, or that a thermometer contains the weather. The instrument is merely a human translation device, a superficial language we invented to make sense of a reality that is far too vast and continuous for our daily minds to grasp. Tonight, you can safely dismantle the authority of the clock. Your day is done, and you no longer need to translate the universe into numbers, deadlines, or schedules. The mechanical counting of the hours has no bearing on your body's natural need for rest. Let the ticking of the clock recede into the distant background of your awareness, becoming nothing more than a faint, meaningless rhythm in the quiet dark. Time is not a grid of rigid minutes to be managed. It is a deep, supportive, and unmeasured ocean in which you are safely floating. Let go of the schedule, release the numbers, and allow your consciousness to sink into a timeless, effortless sleep. The physics of waiting without moving. When you are forced to sit perfectly still in a long line, a quiet waiting room, or an unmoving traffic jam, the experience of waiting feels like a state of absolute stagnation. It feels as though your life has been placed on a frustrating pause, while the rest of the vibrant world continues to rush past you. Your internal clock slows to an agonizing crawl, and every passing minute feels twice as heavy as it normally does. But when we look at the universe through the lens of relativity, physics reveals that waiting without moving is actually a profound, highly active engagement with the fabric of time. In the modern framework of spacetime, you possess a fixed, unvarying total speed that is permanently divided between two realms: your movement through physical space and your movement through time. If you get into a high-speed vehicle and begin rushing frantically across the geography of the Earth, you are consuming a large portion of your cosmic velocity to travel through space. Because your total speed is fixed, this rapid spatial movement forces your journey through time to slow down. Conversely, the absolute moment you sit perfectly still, your spatial velocity drops to absolute zero. Because you are no longer consuming any of your cosmic speed to move through space, your entire, uncompromised velocity is redirected into a single direction. You are now rushing through the dimension of time at the absolute maximum speed allowed by the universe. When you are stationary, you are a high-speed temporal traveler, plunging forward into the future at the speed of light. Stillness is not stagnation. It is the moment you travel through time with the greatest possible momentum. Tonight, you can view your rest as a magnificent, silent journey. As you lie perfectly still beneath your covers, completely unmoving in the dark, you are moving through the timeline of the universe at peak velocity. You do not need to do anything, achieve anything, or manage anything to reach tomorrow. The natural physics of your stillness is already carrying you forward effortlessly through the night. Let the frantic needs of the daytime world dissolve, trusting that your quiet body is perfectly on track, cruising smoothly through the hours toward a deep and restorative morning. Why faster does not always mean closer. In our everyday, logical world, speed is the ultimate tool for collapsing distance. We firmly believe that if we want to bridge the gap between ourselves and a far-off destination, the solution is simply to accelerate. Moving faster means the horizon arrives sooner, the space between points shrinks, and the goal is brought closer to our grasp. We apply this linear logic to our travels, our ambitions, and our daily routines, constantly rushing to close the gaps in our lives. But when physics approaches the ultimate cosmic speed limit, the speed of light, this simple relationship between speed and distance begins to warp in a highly counterintuitive way. As an object accelerates through space, its mass does not remain constant. Instead, the energy of its motion begins to crystallize into physical weight. The faster you travel, the heavier you become. As you edge closer to the speed of light, your mass approaches infinity, requiring an infinite amount of energy to push you even a fraction faster. This extraordinary physical resistance means that no matter how much energy you expend, the ultimate speed limit remains permanently out of reach. Speed ceases to be a simple shortcut that brings a destination closer. It becomes a massive, unyielding wall that warps the very dimensions of the space you are trying to cross. Rushing harder does not elegantly erase the distance. It changes the rules of the terrain itself, making the journey infinitely heavier and more complex than it was when you were standing still. Tonight, you can permanently abandon the urge to accelerate. The long, demanding road of your day is behind you, and there are no more distances you need to forcefully collapse. You cannot bring peace, rest, or clarity any closer by rushing your thoughts or frantically chasing solutions in the dark. The harder your mind runs tonight, the heavier and more complicated your thoughts will become. Real closeness to rest is achieved not by accelerating, but by completely stepping off the track. Let your momentum drop away, allowing the goals of tomorrow to remain far beyond the horizon, and find comfort in the quiet, unhurried space of the present moment as you drift into sleep. How gravity quietly edits time. When we look up at a massive mountain peak piercing the clouds, or gaze down at the deep, plunging floor of a rocky canyon, we see these dramatic landscapes as purely physical arrangements of matter. We think of gravity as a simple, uniform cord that pulls everything toward the earth with equal force, keeping our feet planted safely on the ground. We assume that a clock ticking in a mountain cabin moves in perfect unison with a clock resting on a quiet ocean beach. But Albert Einstein's final equations of relativity revealed that mass does not just pull on objects. It actively warps the invisible geometric dimensions of time itself, creating an invisible temporal gradient across the surface of our planet. According to the laws of gravitational time dilation, the closer a clock sits to a massive body like the Earth, the more tightly the fabric of spacetime is compressed. This intense compression forces the intervals between physical events to stretch out, causing the cosmic clock to tick at a noticeably slower rate. This means that a clock placed at sea level, deep within the Earth's heavy gravitational well, ticks slower than an identical clock kept at the peak of Mount Everest. The difference is completely imperceptible to our daily senses, yet it is a hard, mathematical reality of the universe. Because your feet sit closer to the center of the Earth than your head, your lower body is literally living at a slower temporal pace than your mind. You are continuously aging at different speeds throughout your own body. Tonight, you can fully surrender to the comforting physics of this reality. You have spent the entire day moving through varying heights, navigating different structures, and trying to keep your life synchronized with the rigid, artificial schedules of the outside world. But now, as you lie completely flat and still in the low light of your bedroom, your entire body has settled onto a single, uniform plane of gravity. The invisible distortions of the day have leveled out into a beautiful, harmonious equilibrium. You no longer need to chase the clock or balance your pace against the frantic rhythm of society. Let the global timeline recede, and allow your consciousness to sink into the deep, unhurried and perfectly stabilized temporal current of your quiet room as you drift into sleep. The strange difference between sequence and simultaneity. In our daily lives, our sense of order depends entirely on a clear, shared chronological sequence. We believe with total certainty that if two events happen at the exact same moment, such as two light bulbs flashing simultaneously on opposite sides of a dark room, they happen simultaneously for every single person in the universe. We view the present moment as a massive, cosmic sheet of paper cutting across existence, holding everything that is happening right now in a perfect, synchronized line. But when physics examines the universe through the lens of high-speed motion, the absolute concept of simultaneity completely falls apart, proving that order is entirely relative to the observer. Imagine a fast-moving train hurtling down a track. If a flash of light occurs exactly in the center of a train car, a passenger sitting inside will see the light hit the front wall and the back wall at the exact same microsecond, because the distances are identical. However, an observer standing still on the platform outside will see a completely different reality. Because the train is moving forward, the back wall is actively rushing toward the source of the light, while the front wall is running away from it. To the outside observer, the light strikes the back wall first. Both observers are entirely correct. There is no objective truth to whether the events happened at the exact same time or in a distinct sequence. The universe does not possess a master cosmic clock that dictates the true order of events across space. What feels like a synchronized now, to you is merely a local perspective, a unique trajectory through a fluid web of spacetime. Tonight, you can release the heavy burden of keeping your world in perfect order. You do not need to organize your memories, sort through the timeline of your day, or worry about what must happen next in the sequence of tomorrow. The frantic necessity of chronological alignment is a demand of the waking world that has no power over the night. Let the rigid sequence of events dissolve into a soft, boundaryless pool of awareness. Allow your mind to let go of the timeline, resting comfortably in the quiet, unmeasured depth of the present moment as you drift into a deep sleep. Why now is harder to find than you think. We live our entire lives under the comforting assumption that we are anchored in a solid, universal present called now. We treat this moment as a razor-sharp edge moving cleanly between a vanished past and an unwritten future, a fleeting window where reality is actively taking place. We tell ourselves to stay present, believing that the now is the easiest, most immediate thing to grasp. But when you attempt to locate this present moment using the precise tools of modern physics, you find that a universal, objective now is completely missing from the architecture of the cosmos. Because information cannot travel faster than the speed of light, it takes time for the universe to reach your awareness. Every sight you see, every sound you hear, and every sensation you feel is a historical transmission from a moment that has already concluded. Furthermore, Einstein's relativity proves that observers moving at different speeds or experiencing different gravitational forces will never agree on what constitutes the exact present moment. An event that lies in your unwritten future could be resting in the definitive past of an observer traveling across a distant galaxy. The universe is not a synchronized machine. It is a vast, interconnected web of personal perspective lanes, where the concept of a shared, universal now is mathematically impossible. The present moment is not a rigid line drawn across the cosmos. It is a fluid, psychological harbor built entirely by your own consciousness to give your life structure. Tonight, you can step down from the exhausting effort of trying to find, capture, or hold onto the present. You do not need to anchor your mind to any specific point in time or worry about the rapid passing of the hours. The universe is not rushing past you because there is no single track to rush along. Let the boundaries of time soften and expand in the quiet dark of your room. Release your grasp on the ticking clock and allow your awareness to drift effortlessly into a deep, timeless, and perfectly peaceful rest. The hidden gaps between moments. When we watch a movie in a dark theater, our eyes perceive a flawless, continuous flow of motion. We watch characters move gracefully across the screen, oblivious to the fact that the film is actually a sequence of thousands of individual, static photographs, flashing past a projector bulb with intervals of complete darkness between them. Our brain seamlessly stitches the fragments together, painting over the gaps to create the illusion of a smooth reality. When we study the deep physics of time, science suggests that the actual passage of the universe operates on an identical, highly fragmented framework. In the subatomic equations of quantum mechanics, time is not a smooth, infinitely divisible fluid. Instead, the universe appears to possess a fundamental cosmic pixelation known as the Planck time, the absolute smallest possible increment of duration that can exist. It is roughly 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Physics cannot calculate anything smaller. Time cannot be divided any further. This means that the flow of reality is actually an ultra-high-speed sequence of distinct temporal frames. Between each microflash of existence, there is a hidden, unmeasurable gap where the current frame concludes before the next one initializes. We navigate life on the surface of a cinematic universe, completely unaware of the infinite stillness that lives between the frames. The rigid continuity of your day, the endless chain of cause, effect, worry, and action, is a beautiful illusion built by a mind that prefers a seamless narrative. But tonight, you can choose to inhabit the hidden gaps. You do not need to maintain the continuous movie of your waking life in the dark. The frantic momentum of the daytime world can safely pause between the frames of your awareness. Let the hard edges of your thoughts fracture into soft, peaceful intervals of silence. You are no longer required to stitch the world together or follow the script of the day. Let your consciousness drop through the cracks of the timeline, resting deeply in the infinite, undisturbed quiet that lives behind the ticking of the clock. Why space is not a container. We naturally think of space as a massive, empty cosmic room, a universal container that exists independently of the things placed inside it. We imagine that if we could somehow reach into the universe and scoop out every single galaxy, star, atom, and stray photon of light, we would be left with a permanent, hollow, dark gallery. In this common view, space is the stage, and matter is simply the actor performing upon it. But when Albert Einstein formulated his field equations, he fundamentally altered this perspective, revealing that space is not an empty bucket waiting to be filled, but an active, dynamic entity that cannot exist without the presence of matter. Space and matter are bound together in a continuous, inseparable cosmic relationship. Matter does not simply sit inside space. It actively dictates its shape, its curves, and its behavior. In the language of modern physics, space is a flexible fabric that bends and stretches in the presence of mass. A heavy star doesn't just pull on nearby planets through an invisible force. It presses its massive weight into the fabric of space itself, creating a deep geometric indentation. The planets move in circles because they are simply following the natural curves of the terrain. Without matter to give it shape, structure, and definition, the concept of space completely loses its physical meaning. It is an interdependent tapestry where the container and the contents are one and the same. Tonight, you can release the exhausting need to hold your own life's container together. You often spend your days feeling like an isolated individual trying to navigate a vast, indifferent, and empty world, constantly managing the distance between yourself and your goals. But physics reveals that you are completely woven into the fabric of your environment. You and the quiet room around you are part of the same continuous, unbroken topography of reality. As you lie still in the dark, let the imaginary boundary between yourself and the space around you dissolve. You do not need to fill the void or conquer the distance. Let your body sink into the supportive fabric of the night, resting perfectly in an environment that is intimately shaped by your very presence. The shape of nothing. When we think of the word nothing, our minds naturally conjure an image of absolute pitch-black emptiness, a total, unblemished void where all form, geometry, and substance have been completely erased. We treat nothingness as the ultimate absence of structure, a passive blank slate that possesses no qualities, no features, and no identity of its own. But when cosmologists and theoretical physicists look at the overall geometry of our universe, they discover that empty space, the vast nothing that stretches between the galaxies, possesses a definitive, measurable geometric shape that actively determines the ultimate destiny of existence. By measuring the faint, ancient light left over from the dawn of time, scientists have been working to determine whether the fabric of our universe is curved like a sphere, shaped like a saddle, or perfectly flat. The data reveals something extraordinary. The cosmos appears to be flat with an incredibly high degree of precision. This flatness means that if you were to shine two parallel beams of light out into the dark void of space, they would travel for trillions of miles through the absolute nothingness without ever crossing or drifting apart. This structural precision requires a perfect, delicate balance between the expansion speed of the universe and the total mass contained within it. The nothing of space is not a chaotic, formless void. It is a meticulously calibrated geometric landscape. Tonight, you can find profound comfort in the true nature of nothingness. You do not need to fear the quiet, empty spaces in your thoughts or view the silence of your room as an anxious vacuum that needs to be filled with worry. The stillness of the night is not a lack of form or meaning. It is a beautifully balanced, stable architecture designed to provide you with absolute rest. Just as the vast voids of the cosmos possess a perfect, flat tranquility, the quiet spaces in your mind tonight can be a place of structural peace. Let go of the urge to construct thoughts, plans, or scenarios. Allow your awareness to settle into the smooth, unburdened shape of the silent night, drifting effortlessly into a deep and restorative sleep. How distance can be bended without being broken. In our everyday world, distance feels like an absolute, unyielding law of nature. If 2 points are separated by a mile of solid terrain, that mile represents a fixed quantity of space that requires a definitive amount of time, energy, and momentum to cross. We view distance as a rigid, uncompromising barrier that keeps things permanently apart unless a physical journey is undertaken. But when physics looks at the fundamental mathematics of spacetime, it reveals that distance is not an unbending iron rod, but a highly flexible, elastic coordinate that can be drastically warped without ever breaking the continuity of the universe. According to the concept of Einstein-Rosen bridges, more commonly known as wormholes, the geometry of space can undergo a profound mathematical manipulation. Imagine drawing two distant dots on opposite ends of a flat sheet of paper. To travel from one to the other, you must move across the entire length of the page. But if you physically fold the paper in half, you can bring those two distant dots into direct alignment, touching one another face to face. A wormhole does exactly this to the three-dimensional fabric of the universe. It creates a highly localized, intense gravitational warping that punches through the fabric of spacetime, connecting two widely separated regions of the cosmos through a short, immediate conduit. A traveler passing through this bridge could cross billions of light years in a single step, proving that separation is an illusion of perspective. Tonight, you can use this cosmic architecture to dissolve the heavy distances in your own mind. You may feel separated from peace, far away from clarity, or distant from the resolution of your daytime problems. But mental distance, just like cosmic space, is entirely elastic. You do not need to undertake a long, exhausting cognitive journey or solve a mountain of dilemmas tonight to reach a state of absolute tranquility. By simply choosing to let go of the day's momentum, you can fold the fabric of your thoughts. You can bring the present moment into direct, immediate contact with total rest, bypassing the long road of worry completely. Let the distance between where you are and where you want to be collapse into nothingness, and step directly into the quiet, immediate sanctuary of deep sleep. The strange meaning of curved space. When we look at a long, straight highway cutting across a desert landscape, or gaze up at a beam of light shooting directly from a flashlight into the night sky, we see straight lines as the absolute truth of spatial geometry. We assume that a straight line is a fundamental, unchanging constant, the shortest path between 2 points that remains identical no matter what happens around it. We believe that space is inherently flat, like a massive sheet of graph paper extending out to infinity in every direction. But Albert Einstein's insights into cosmic architecture revealed that mass can bend the very grid lines of the universe, completely redefining what it means to travel in a straight line. Imagine a two-dimensional ant walking across the surface of a tightly stretched rubber sheet. If you place a heavy bowling ball in the middle of that sheet, the rubber will sink down, creating a deep, sloped funnel. If the ant tries to walk past the bowling ball in a straight line, the slope will naturally pull its path inward, forcing it to travel along a curved trajectory. The ant does not feel any mysterious force pulling on its body, and from its local perspective, it is keeping its feet perfectly straight. It is simply traversing a landscape where the straightest possible path has itself become curved. This is exactly how gravity operates on the scale of stars and planets. A massive object curves the space around it, forcing light beams and drifting satellites to follow the contours of a warped geometry. Straightness is not a rigid rule written into the vacuum, but an adaptive journey that molds itself to the contours of matter. Space is a dynamic, living geometry that responds to every ounce of energy in the universe. Tonight, you can release the heavy burden of keeping your own path perfectly straight and orderly. You have spent your day forcing your actions, your thoughts, and your routines into rigid, linear schedules, constantly trying to move directly from one task to the next. But the physics of the cosmos shows us that nature prefers the elegance of a curve. As you lie still in the dark, let the rigid lines of your daily mind soften and bend. You do not need to maintain a straight course or plan out a linear trajectory for tomorrow. Allow your awareness to conform effortlessly to the gentle, curved contours of the quiet evening, drifting smoothly down into a deep, restful sleep. How the universe can expand without moving into anything. When we hear the profound scientific truth that our universe is continuously expanding, that galaxies are actively rushing away from one another at millions of miles per hour, our minds naturally struggle to visualize the concept. We immediately imagine a massive, inflating balloon popping inside a larger, empty room. We wonder what lies outside the borders of the balloon, and what kind of vast, dark territory the universe is currently moving into as it grows larger every second. We instinctively look for an exterior container, a background space that was already waiting there to be conquered. But modern cosmology presents us with a reality that breaks this standard logic completely. The universe is not expanding into anything, because there is no outside to be found. The expansion of the cosmos is not the movement of physical objects through an existing gallery of space. It is the expansion of the space itself. Imagine an infinite sheet of elastic grid paper with dots drawn on it. If you pull the edges of the paper, the lines stretch out, and the distance between every single dot increases simultaneously. The dots aren't traveling across the paper. Rather, new space is being continuously manufactured between them. The universe does not possess a physical boundary wall or a frontier edge that is pushing forward into a vacant void. Space is a self-contained infinity that is simply growing more spacious internally. It creates its own terrain as it goes, rewriting the metric of distance from within the fabric of reality itself. Existence does not require an external container to validate its growth or hold its architecture in place. It is a completely self-sustaining entity that expands without needing any extra room. Tonight, you can use this cosmic reality to soothe your own racing mind. You often spend your days feeling as though your thoughts and worries require a vast amount of mental space, as though your brain is a crowded container that is running out of room under the weight of your responsibilities. But your consciousness, just like the universe, is a self-contained expanse that can expand its capacity from within. You do not need to push outward or find an exit from your thoughts. Let the artificial borders of your mind dissolve into the dark. Your awareness can grow infinitely spacious right where you are, breathing easily in its own self-sustained stillness as you drift into a peaceful sleep. Why the cosmos has no obvious end. If you set sail on a wooden ship in the ancient world and traveled in a single direction for long enough, your everyday logic would tell you that you must eventually reach an absolute boundary. You would expect to find a massive shoreline, a towering wall of ice, or a dramatic precipice where the ocean ends and something else begins. We apply this exact same linear intuition to the scale of the night sky, assuming that if we could board a high-speed spacecraft and fly through the dark void for billions of light years, we would eventually strike a cosmic perimeter, a definitive edge marking the end of the universe. But when astronomers map the grandest scales of reality, they find that the cosmos possesses no physical edge anywhere in its architecture. This edgeless reality occurs because the geometry of space can warp in a way that eliminates boundaries entirely while remaining finite in volume. Imagine a tiny creature living on the surface of a perfectly smooth glass marble. The creature can walk forward in a straight line for eternity, crossing thousands of miles without ever running into a wall, a dead end, or a drop-off. The surface of the marble is completely limitless, yet the marble itself occupies a small, defined portion of space. On a cosmic scale, the three-dimensional fabric of our universe may be curved back onto itself in a higher dimension. If you fly a starship in a straight line across the cosmos for long enough, you will never strike a wall. Instead, you will eventually loop right back to your exact starting point, having traversed a limitless, self-contained infinity. The universe does not need a boundary line to define its existence or separate it from a void. It is a complete, unfragmented whole that contains all pathways within its own elegant design. Tonight, you can fully step down from the exhausting search for boundaries and endpoints in your own life. You spend your waking hours constantly looking for conclusions, deadlines, and definitive answers to your complex problems, trying to find where your worries end and where your peace begins. But peace is not a destination marked by a boundary line. Just like the edgeless cosmos, Your mind can be a space of infinite circular freedom, where there are no walls to hit and no borders to defend. Let go of the need for an ending or a final resolution. Allow your thoughts to loop gently into a soft, limitless circle of awareness, resting deeply in the vast, edgeless sanctuary of the night. The quiet, bizarre nature of far away. In our familiar, terrestrial lives, distance acts as a simple buffer that reduces the intensity of things. If you walk away from a crackling campfire, the heat on your skin gently diminishes. If you drive away from a loud city center, the rumble of traffic gradually fades into a soft, manageable hum. We treat far away as a passive, empty baseline of safety, a spatial attic where we can store things we don't want to interact with right now, confident that their influence cannot cross the massive gulf of space without an immense amount of time and effort. But when astrophysics scales this logic up to the ultimate theater of the cosmos, far away ceases to be a peaceful, empty zone. It becomes a bizarre, active engine that fundamentally warps how we perceive the history and reality of the universe. Because light possesses a strict cosmic speed limit, traveling at roughly 186,000 miles per second, distance across the universe is inextricably bound to time. When you look at an object that is incredibly far away, you are not viewing it as it exists in the present moment. You are looking down a long, deep archaeological telescope into the ancient past. If you look at a galaxy located 10 billion light-years from Earth, you are seeing light that left its stars before our planet was even a cloud of cosmic dust. You are looking at a ghost of reality. Furthermore, due to the accelerating expansion of space, those ultra-distant objects are currently rushing away from us at speeds that approach, and sometimes exceed, the speed of light. The space between us is expanding so quickly that the light they emit right now will never manage to cross the growing void to reach our eyes. They are actively falling over the edge of our cosmic horizon, disappearing into a permanent, unmeasurable dark. Distance on a cosmic scale does not simply separate objects. It fragments the very synchronicity of existence, turning the night sky into a beautifully layered tapestry of different historical epochs. Tonight, you can let this reality soothe your own relationship with the things that feel far away in your life. You often carry an immense amount of daily anxiety about distant uncertainties, worrying about future events, faraway goals, or long-term problems that feel miles away from resolution. But just like the distant galaxies, those far-off anxieties do not possess a solid, threatening reality in your present room. They are merely abstract projections, completely disconnected from the immediate sanctuary of your evening. You do not need to build a bridge to tomorrow or navigate the vast distance of the future tonight. Let the horizon recede into a quiet, unmeasurable dark. Allow your mind to detach from the far-off corners of your life, resting perfectly in the immediate, close-up comfort of your still room as you drift into a deep sleep. Why up and down are only local ideas? From the moment we take our very first steps as children, our entire physical orientation is dictated by two absolute coordinates, up and down. We treat down as the definitive, unyielding bedrock of reality, the reliable, permanent floor that catches our weight, holds our homes, and pulls every dropped object toward the earth. We view up as the infinite, open ceiling of the sky, an absolute direction pointing toward the heavens. We rely so heavily on this vertical grid that it shapes our language, our architecture, our psychological sense of stability, and our metaphors for success and failure. But the moment you leave the thin, fragile atmosphere of our planet and enter the true expanse of the solar system, this rigid vertical architecture vanishes completely, revealing that up and down are nothing more than narrow, highly localized illusions. In the vast vacuum of outer space, there is no universal ceiling and no cosmic floor. If an astronaut floats completely upside down relative to their spacecraft, they do not experience a dizzying sensation of falling, because the universe does not possess an inherent vertical axis. Down is not an absolute direction written into the fabric of space. It is simply an egocentric term we use to describe our proximity to the nearest massive gravitational well. To a person standing on the North Pole, down points toward the core of the Earth, which means their up points in the exact opposite direction of someone standing on the South Pole. If both individuals look up at the sky simultaneously, they are gazing toward completely opposite horizons of the cosmos. The universe is a fluid, multidirectional expanse where every coordinate is relative, and no single orientation holds a monopoly on the truth of space. The rigid vertical lines we use to navigate our daily lives are merely local custom, a convenient framework created by our relationship with the planet beneath our feet. Tonight, you can fully release yourself from the heavy architecture of these local ideas. Throughout your long day, your mind has been trapped in an exhausting vertical struggle, constantly trying to climb upward toward goals, measuring your progress, and fearing the drop of failure or regression. But as you lie completely flat and weightless beneath your covers in the quiet dark, the demand for vertical alignment completely dissolves. You no longer need to climb, balance, or maintain your stance against the world. There is no upward climb to worry about, and no downward drop to fear. The night offers you a beautiful, multi-directional freedom where you can simply float. Let go of the grid, release the coordinates of your day, and allow your consciousness to drift effortlessly into the boundless, weightless sea of a deep sleep. The physics of falling without knowing you're falling. Imagine an astronaut floating inside a metallic capsule in deep orbit around the Earth. If you watch them on a live video feed, they appear to exist in a state of absolute, serene weightlessness. They glide effortlessly through the air, their tools float beside them like stationary ghosts, and water droplets form perfect, unmoving liquid spheres in the center of the room. It looks as though they have successfully escaped the heavy, demanding pull of gravity entirely, entering a sanctuary of total physical liberation far above the planet. But when you look at the actual mathematics of orbital mechanics, physics reveals an extraordinary paradox. The astronaut is not free from gravity at all. In fact, they are experiencing an intense, continuous gravitational pull, and their weightlessness is actually the result of a permanent, endless fall. The capsule and the astronaut are located in a region where the Earth's gravity is still immensely strong, pulling them downward with roughly 90% of the force felt on the surface. The reason they don't crash into the ground is due to their immense forward velocity. As gravity pulls the capsule downward toward the dirt, the capsule is moving sideways at over 17,000 miles per hour, so fast that the surface of the curved Earth drops away at the exact same rate that the capsule falls. The astronaut is continuously falling around the horizon, plunging toward the planet but continuously missing it. Because the capsule and the passenger are falling at the exact same speed, all relative weight vanishes. They are navigating a state of perpetual freefall, yet from their internal perspective, it feels like absolute motionless peace. Weightlessness is not the absence of gravity. It is the total, unresisting surrender to its motion. You do not feel the fall when you completely stop fighting the current. Tonight, you can apply this profound physical lesson to the heavy momentum of your own life. You often spend your days desperately trying to resist the natural gravity of your circumstances, frantically tensing your mind to catch yourself, to hold things in place, and to prevent your life from falling out of alignment. This constant resistance is what creates the internal weight, friction, and anxiety of your day. But tonight, there is nothing you need to forcefully hold onto, and no collision waiting for you at the bottom. You can safely stop resisting the gravity of time. Let yourself enter a state of emotional freefall, completely surrendering to the natural downward current of the evening. Trust the quiet rhythm of the night to carry you smoothly without your effort and float peacefully into a deep, weightless sleep. Why matter is mostly not solid. When you press your hand firmly against the wooden top of a nightstand, the surface feels undeniably solid. It offers a hard, immediate resistance that arrests your movement, convincing your senses that you have encountered a dense, tightly packed barrier of absolute substance. We navigate the world under the assumption that material objects, walls, floors, coins, and bones, are solid blocks of matter that occupy space completely, leaving no room for emptiness within their borders. But when physics descends past the threshold of the visible world and peers into the structure of the atom, it reveals that the things we call solid are almost entirely composed of pure, vacant space. An atom consists of a tiny, dense nucleus surrounded by a cloud of orbiting electrons. To visualize its true proportions, imagine magnifying the nucleus of an atom until it is the size of a single marble sitting on the 50-yard line of a massive sports stadium. The outermost electrons of that atom would be spinning around the very upper rim of the highest stadium seats. Everything between that lonely marble on the field and those distant seats in the stands is a vast, echoing expanse of absolute nothingness. If you were to strip away all the empty space from every single atom inside your body, your remaining physical substance would be squeezed into a speck of dust so small that it could easily pass through the eye of a needle. The resistance you feel when you touch a table is not the collision of solid pieces of matter. It is merely the intense, invisible electromagnetic fields of your hand's electrons pushing against the electron fields of the wood. Tonight, let the vast emptiness of the physical world lighten the burden of your thoughts. The rigid, heavy structures of your daily environment are not as unyielding or solid as they appear. They are mostly made of empty space, held together by a quiet, delicate balance of invisible energy. You do not need to fight or brace yourself against a world of hard, unyielding barriers. Let your body relax into the bed, trusting that the material world is fundamentally light, spacious, and perfectly at peace in its own open architecture. The hidden emptiness inside everything. We look at the massive bulk of a stone mountain, the heavy iron of an anchor, or the solid plaster of our bedroom walls, and we feel a deep sense of permanence and weight. We naturally believe that mass is a measure of pure, concentrated substance, that a heavy object simply contains a greater amount of physical stuff, packed tightly into its frame. We treat emptiness as a property of the air or the void, and mass as the absolute signature of solid existence. But when particle physics breaks down the subatomic components of matter, it discovers a spectacular reality. The mass of the objects around you does not come from solid particles at all, but from the invisible energy vibrating within the hidden emptiness of the universe. The primary building blocks of everyday matter are protons and neutrons, which themselves are made of even smaller particles called quarks. If you look up the intrinsic mass of individual quarks, you find something baffling. When you add their weights together, they account for less than 1% of a proton's total mass. The remaining 99% of the weight of everything you have ever touched or lifted is completely unaccounted for by physical matter. That mass is actually created by the kinetic energy of the gluons, the massless force carriers that bind the quarks together, rushing frantically back and forth through the subatomic voids at the speed of light. Matter is not a collection of heavy weights. It is energy locked into an infinite loop of localized motion. Weight is merely energy performing a silent, perpetual dance inside the microscopic gaps of the world. The material stuff of your life is fundamentally weightless, borrowing its presence from a deeper pool of cosmic movement. Tonight, you can safely lay down the heavy weight you have been carrying through the long hours of your day. The worries, the pressures, and the dense anxieties that feel so solid and permanent in your mind are not inherent fixtures of your identity. They are merely temporary arrangements of mental energy, shifting through the open landscape of your awareness. You do not need to carry or manage their mass tonight. Let the solid weight of your thoughts dissolve back into pure, unburdened potential, and allow your consciousness to float effortlessly into a light, spacious sleep. How tiny things refuse to behave like tiny things. In our macro world, an object is always defined by its strict, predictable boundaries. A billiard ball resting on a green felt table sits in one precise location. It possesses a definitive mass, a measurable velocity, and a clear trajectory when struck. It never spontaneously dissolves into a cloud of mist, nor does it exist in multiple places simultaneously. We carry this intuitive logic down to our mental image of the subatomic world, picturing electrons and protons as ultramicroscopic marbles bouncing around inside the architecture of the atom. But when physics looks at the actual behavior of quantum particles, it discovers that tiny things flatly refuse to act like objects at all. Instead, they behave like fields of pure probability. When a particle like an electron is left completely unobserved, it completely sheds its localized identity. It ceases to be a single thing moving along a single path. Instead, its mathematical description transforms into a wave function, a fluid ripple that spreads out through space, exploring every available trajectory, crossing multiple barriers, and occupying infinite potential locations at the exact same moment. The electron effectively becomes a ghost of possibility, refusing to solidify into a concrete coordinate until an external force or a conscious measurement forces its wave function to collapse. It is only when the universe demands an absolute answer that the particle condenses out of the mist, pretending to be a solid object for a fleeting microsecond. Subatomic world is not a collection of tiny building blocks, but a fluid ocean of potential where things prefer to remain open, unstructured, and continuous. Tonight, you can allow your own mind to take inspiration from this quantum freedom. Throughout your day, you have been forced to act like a rigid macro object, holding yourself to precise schedules, staying confined to specific roles, and keeping your worries locked into tight, demanding coordinates. But tonight, the rules of the waking world no longer apply. You can safely let your thoughts lose their hard boundaries. Let your mind transform from a solid particle into a gentle, expanding wave of pure potential, drifting effortlessly through memories and possibilities without any forced direction as you sink into a deep rest. Why particles don't really travel the way we imagine. When we think about traveling from one side of a room to the other, our minds visualize a smooth, unbroken line crossing through space. We know that to reach the door, we must physically traverse every single millimeter of distance that lies between our starting point and our destination. We project this linear journey onto the subatomic world, imagining an electron traveling from an atom's nucleus to its outer shell like a tiny satellite rocket boosting through space. But quantum mechanics reveals that subatomic particles completely reject this continuous journey. When a particle moves between two states, it doesn't cross the space between them at all. It simply ceases to exist in one place and instantaneously appears in another. This mind-bending phenomenon is known as a quantum leap. When an electron inside an atom absorbs a packet of light energy, it transitions to a higher energy level. Crucially, it is never found traveling through the intermediate space between the two orbits. There is no trajectory, no travel time, and no physical path. It vanishes from the lower rung of the energy ladder and materializes on the higher rung in an absolute zero-time interval. It is as if you could step off the first floor of a building and instantly stand on the second floor without ever passing through the air or crossing the stairs. The very fabric of subatomic movement is inherently fragmented, bypassing the traditional laws of continuous distance entirely. Movement at the foundational level of reality is not a grueling marathon across a line, but an effortless reconfiguration of presence. Tonight, you can release yourself from the exhausting illusion of the long road. You often spend your evenings lying in bed, mentally walking through the long, complex sequences of steps required to reach your goals, fix your problems, or organize your life. This continuous mental tracking is what keeps your brain spinning in circles. But peace does not require you to cross a miles-long bridge of thought tonight. Just like a quantum particle, you can instantly shift your state without resolving the space between. You can simply let go of the daytime orbit and materialize directly in the space of rest, leaving the intermediate steps behind as you drift into a deep sleep. The strange rules of being in more than one possibility. If you toss a coin into the air, Your common sense tells you that while it is spinning through space, it already possesses a definitive identity. You assume that it is either secretly heads or secretly tails, and that your act of catching it against your wrist merely reveals a choice that nature had already made mid-flight. We apply this comfort to our daily lives, believing that the world is always secretly settled behind the scenes, even when we cannot see it. But when quantum physics examines a particle in a state of quantum superposition, it shatters this intuition entirely, proving that an unobserved system does not hide a secret reality. It genuinely embodies multiple contradictory truths at the exact same time. In the subatomic realm, until a particle interacts with an observer or an environment, it exists in a literal mathematical combination of all its possible states. An electron does not choose a clockwise or counterclockwise spin. It is spinning in both directions simultaneously. A particle does not choose left or right. It explores both doors at once. This is not a statement about human ignorance or a lack of precise measurement tools. It is a fundamental property of the universe's architecture. Reality at its core is designed to maximize its options, holding onto a state of open-ended freedom for as long as possible before being forced into a single, restrictive outcome. Superposition is nature's way of remaining flexible, a beautiful cosmic hesitation where every path remains valid. Tonight, you can fully embrace the wisdom of this open state. Your mind has spent the day forced to make definitive choices, pick sides, solve dilemmas, and commit to fixed perspectives. This constant pressure to choose is incredibly taxing to your consciousness. But tonight, you can step down from the seat of judgment. You do not need to settle your thoughts, resolve your doubts, or pick a definitive path for tomorrow. You can let your mind enter a state of peaceful superposition, where all your plans, memories, and possibilities exist together in a soft, non-conflicting harmony, resting comfortably in the quiet void of sleep. Why observation changes the question. For centuries, science operated under the assumption that the universe was an objective clockwork machine. We believed that a scientist could slip a thermometer into a beaker of water, look through a telescope at a distant planet, or measure the speed of a falling apple without ever altering the system itself. The observer was treated as an invisible ghost, a passive camera recording pre-existing facts. But when quantum mechanics began probing the foundational behavior of matter, this comfortable boundary between the investigator and the reality completely collapsed. It revealed that you cannot ask nature a question without actively altering the answer. In the famous double-slit experiment, when subatomic particles are fired through two narrow openings without any tracking devices nearby, they act like fluid waves, creating a pattern of overlapping ripples on a back wall. They explore all possibilities simultaneously. But if scientists place a microscopic detector at the slits to observe exactly which opening each particle passes through, the behavior changes instantly. The fluid wave disappears, and the particles begin acting like solid little bullets, striking the wall in two straight lines. The mere presence of a measurement device, the act of trying to find out what is happening, rewrites the rules of the game. The universe does not possess a single, fixed backstory that sits waiting to be discovered. The way you choose to look at reality actively forces nature to collapse its fluid potentials into a specific, concrete state. Tonight, you can release the heavy burden of trying to observe, monitor, and analyze your own life. Throughout your long day, your mind has been acting like a hypervigilant detector, constantly checking your progress, measuring your worries, and trying to figure out the exact trajectory of your problems. But this continuous internal observation is precisely what forces your fluid thoughts into hard, anxious realities. When you turn off the detector and withdraw your watchful eye, you allow the rigid problems of your day to dissolve back into a soft sea of harmless potential. Let go of the need to check, evaluate, or understand anything tonight. Allow your mind to become completely unobserved, resting deeply in the quiet, unstructured freedom of the dark. How reality waits before becoming clear in our everyday experience. We assume that the physical world is always completely decided. We believe that the book resting on your nightstand has a definitive weight, the air in your room has an exact temperature, and the floor beneath you has a solid, unyielding position, regardless of whether anyone is paying attention to them. We treat reality as a finished product, a fully rendered landscape that is permanently locked into focus. But when quantum physics explores the moments leading up to a physical interaction, it reveals that nature operates on a system of delayed definition. Reality literally waits for an interaction before making up its mind. Until a subatomic particle collides with a detector, a light photon strikes a surface, or an environment registers its presence, it exists in a state of suspended animation known as coherence. It does not possess a definite position, a clear velocity, or a fixed identity. Instead, it travels through space as a mathematical blur of multiple, overlapping probabilities. It is as if the universe refuses to waste its computing power on rendering the fine details of a room until someone actually walks through the door. The physical properties of matter remain soft, fluid, and undecided, waiting patiently in a state of pure potential until the exact microsecond an interaction forces them to crystallize into a concrete fact. This means that at its most foundational level, the universe is deeply patient, preferring to leave its options open rather than rushing into a fixed reality. Tonight, you can grant your own mind the exact same luxury of delayed definition. You often spend your evenings lying awake because you feel an urgent necessity to have everything in your life completely figured out, demanding immediate clarity on your future, your problems, and your choices. But nature shows us that it is entirely natural for things to remain soft, blurred, and undecided for a while. You do not need to resolve any dilemmas or force any clarity tonight. Let your plans and your worries return to a state of quiet, unrendered probability. Allow yourself to rest comfortably in the half-light, trusting that reality can wait until tomorrow before becoming clear. The mystery of things that seem to decide too late. Our common sense dictates that the past is entirely unchangeable. We believe with total certainty that once an event has occurred, once a light has flashed, a path has been chosen, or an action has taken place, it is permanently carved into the stone timeline of history. No action performed in the present moment should ever be able to travel backward through time to rewrite how an event unfolded hours, days, or years ago. But in a mind-bending variation of quantum testing known as the delayed choice experiment, physicists discovered that choices made in the present can retroactively dictate how a particle behaved in the deep past. In this extraordinary setup, a photon of light is fired toward a boundary where it must choose between taking a single path like a particle, or taking two paths simultaneously like a wave. The photon completes its long journey through the apparatus, making its choice behind closed doors. It is only at the very final microsecond, right before the light strikes a recording screen, that scientists randomly decide whether to activate a detector that measures which path the photon took. Shockingly, the choice made by the scientists after the photon had already completed its journey retroactively determines whether the particle traveled as a wave or a bullet at the beginning of the trip. The particle seems to decide how to behave only after the journey is already over. The boundaries of time are far more fluid and interconnected than our linear minds can easily comprehend. The present moment holds a strange, creative dialogue with the history that preceded it, proving that the past is not a rigid cage. Tonight, you can use this reality to completely let go of the mistakes, regrets, and events of your day. You often lie awake replaying past moments in your mind, wishing you could travel back to alter a conversation, a choice, or an action. But physics shows us that the ultimate meaning of the past is never fully locked in stone. It remains open to how you choose to settle in the present. By choosing to let go and enter a state of total, unresisting rest tonight, you retroactively change the weight of your entire day. You transform a stressful history into a harmless prelude to deep sleep. Let the past settle itself and drop into a quiet, effortless rest. Why some properties appear only when measured. We naturally believe that the objects around us possess inherent, permanent traits that belong to them exclusively. We assume that a red blanket is inherently red in the dark, that a heavy book possesses weight when it sits alone on a shelf, and that a coin in your pocket has a definitive face-up before you ever reach in to grab it. We view our senses as passive flashlights that merely reveal these pre-existing qualities. But when quantum mechanics isolates a subatomic particle, it discovers that many of the fundamental properties we take for granted, such as the spin, polarization, or exact position of an electron, do not actually exist until the moment they are actively measured. Before an instrument interacts with a quantum particle, the particle does not possess a secret, hidden value for its properties. It exists in an abstract state where all possible values are true at once. It is the physical act of measurement, the aggressive intervention of the outside world, that strips away this open-ended freedom and forces the particle to manifest a specific, limited trait. The color, the angle, or the position is not a feature of the object alone, but a consequence of the relationship between the observer and the observed. Properties are not static possessions. They are dynamic events that are born during an interaction and dissolve the moment that interaction concludes. The hard, rigid characteristics we assign to our lives are often just temporary products of our continuous effort to measure them. Throughout your day, you have been constantly measuring your own traits, evaluating your productivity, testing your patience, and defining your stress levels. This continuous self-measurement is what creates the illusion of a heavy, unchanging identity. But tonight, you can step down from the scale. When you stop measuring yourself, you allow your rigid, defined traits to dissolve back into a peaceful pool of unformed potential. You do not need to be productive, successful, or organized in the dark. Let go of all your defined properties and allow your mind to expand into a soft, nameless, and deeply restful state of being. The quiet rebellion of the quantum world. We live our daily lives inside a comfortable kingdom of predictable macrophysics. We rely on the unyielding laws of cause, effect, friction, and gravity to keep our world orderly and stable. We know that a car will slow down when the brakes are applied, that water will always flow downhill, and that a heavy door will remain securely shut until a physical force pushes it open. We assume that these reliable rules are the absolute laws of existence, governing every single layer of the cosmos from the grandest galaxy down to the smallest speck of dust. But when we cross the threshold into the deep quantum realm, we find a world engaged in a quiet, perpetual rebellion against everything we consider logical. At the subatomic scale, particles routinely break the speed limit of light, pass through solid walls as if they were smoke, exist in multiple states at once, and communicate instantly across vast distances with zero time delay. The quantum world completely rejects the rigid, deterministic chains that lock our daytime lives into place. It operates on a deeper currency of pure irony, probability, and fluid grace, showing us that at the very root of our structured, predictable reality lies a wild, beautiful, and unrestricted freedom. The solid, unyielding world we navigate during the day is merely a superficial crust floating on top of a deep, undulating ocean of infinite subatomic magic. Tonight, you can fully align yourself with this quiet rebellion. The demanding, rigid rules that governed your waking hours, the schedules you had to follow, the logic you had to maintain, and the weight you had to carry are only superficial laws of the macro world. They have no jurisdiction over the deep, fundamental why information may be more real than stuff. In our daily lives, we treat physical objects, a heavy stone, a solid door, a glass of water, as the ultimate foundation of reality. We assume that material stuff is the primary truth of the universe, and that concepts, rules, and data are merely secondary descriptions that humans invented to organize their surroundings. We believe that a book is real because we can touch its pages, while the story written inside it is just abstract information. But when modern theoretical physics pushes past the boundaries of quantum mechanics, a revolutionary hypothesis emerges. The material world may not be made of matter at all. Instead, the universe may be constructed entirely out of pure information. This profound concept, famously summarized by physicist John Archibald Wheeler as it from bit, suggests that every physical object, every force field, and even the fabric of spacetime itself derives its existence from the binary answers to yes or no quantum questions. When we break a particle down to its absolute roots, we do not find a tiny, hard billiard ball. We find a set of relational data, properties like spin, charge, and position that exist only as values registered through an interaction. The universe behaves less like a collection of solid hardware and more like a cosmic software program, where what we perceive as mass and solid structure is simply the sensory output of a deeper, underlying matrix of pure digital code. Material reality is not a collection of independent objects, but a magnificent tapestry woven out of information patterns. Tonight, let this radical perspective lighten the weight of your thoughts. The heavy, demanding physical structures of your day, the places you had to go, the tasks you had to complete, and the boundaries you had to navigate, are not unyielding, permanent fixtures of existence. They are merely temporary arrangements of data shifting across the field of reality. You do not need to wrestle with the hard stuff of the world tonight. Let the physical landscape of your day dissolve back into a quiet, unburdened sea of pure potential. Allow your mind to detach from the material frame, resting comfortably in the soft, silent code of the evening as you drift into sleep. The physics of a universe made of rules. Imagine looking at a magnificent tapestry hanging on a wall. From a distance, your eyes focus on the dramatic imagery, the vivid colors, the intricate shapes, and the sweeping landscapes woven into the fabric. You naturally treat the images as the primary truth of the art. But if you step forward and press your face against the threads, the grand pictures disappear. You see that the entire display is actually dictated by a strict, repetitive grid of interlocking knots, a precise system of mathematical rules governing how every single thread must cross another. The grand illusion of the scenery is entirely born out of the rigid discipline of the framework beneath it. This is exactly how physics views the architecture of the cosmos. The vibrant, chaotic, and unpredictable world we experience during the day, the rushing weather, the roaring traffic, the complex human routines, is merely a superficial pattern floating on top of an incredibly disciplined system of fundamental laws. The universe does not make erratic guesses or operate on random whims. From the elegant orbit of a massive galaxy down to the invisible spin of an electron, everything behaves in perfect adherence to a set of unchanging mathematical equations. There is a deep, unyielding logic woven into the vacuum, ensuring that even in the midst of cosmic explosions or terrestrial noise, a profound, underlying structural order is permanently maintained. The universe is a self-sustaining masterpiece of pure harmony, where every chaotic event is quietly governed by an unbroken set of cosmic rules. Tonight, you can fully surrender to the absolute safety of this design. You have spent your entire day trying to enforce your own rules, frantically organizing schedules, managing uncertainties, and trying to keep your life from falling out of alignment through sheer mental effort. This constant management is what creates the deep friction and exhaustion in your mind. But tonight, you can safely step down from the position of supervisor. The fundamental laws of physics are perfectly capable of holding reality together without your continuous intervention. Let go of the need to control or organize your world. Trust the deep, silent rules of the cosmos to maintain the perfect equilibrium of your room, and allow yourself to drop into a deep, effortless sleep. How entropy slowly changes the shape of everything. If you drop a fragile porcelain teacup onto a hard stone floor, it instantly shatters into 100 jagged, chaotic fragments. You will never, in the entire history of your life, witness those scattered shards spontaneously leap back into the air, fuse their borders together, and reform a perfect, unbroken cup on your table. We navigate life with an intuitive awareness of this one-way street, knowing that it is incredibly easy for things to become disorganized, messy, and broken, but immensely difficult to restore them to a state of pristine neatness. This universal bias is not a superficial annoyance of human life. It is dictated by the second law of thermodynamics, the absolute rule of entropy. Entropy is a mathematical measure of disorder, and the laws of physics state that in any closed system, entropy must always increase over time. This unyielding law exists simply because there are millions of random ways for a group of particles to be disorganized, but only one very specific arrangement that creates an orderly structure like a teacup, a neat room, or a living body. The universe is caught in a perpetual, slow-motion unwinding, a gradual dispersal of energy where structures naturally soften, hard boundaries fade, and concentrated heat slowly radiates out into the cool, uniform dark of the void. Entropy is the ultimate cosmic architect, silently shifting the shape of reality every single microsecond. The natural movement of the universe is not toward rigid tense perfection, but toward a relaxed, uniform state of absolute rest. Tonight, you can stop fighting against this magnificent cosmic current. Throughout your demanding day, your mind has been engaged in a fierce, exhausting battle against entropy, constantly expending energy to force your thoughts, your work, your relationships, and your routines into tight, perfect boxes of order. This endless tidying is what leaves your consciousness feeling so brittle and strained, but the night offers you a beautiful, therapeutic release. You are officially permitted to let the structure unwind. Let the rigid boundaries of your day soften, and allow your thoughts to scatter harmlessly into the quiet background. You do not need to fix, arrange, or repair anything tonight. Yield to the natural, restful drift of the cosmos, and allow your mind to dissolve peacefully into a deep, unstructured sleep. Why the future feels open, but not random. When we think about tomorrow, we naturally perceive it as a completely unwritten, wide-open landscape. We imagine that our lives are a series of blank pages, waiting to be filled by our choices, unexpected turns of fortune, and the shifting winds of happenstance. We treat the future as a space of pure, chaotic freedom, completely distinct from the rigid, locked-in certainty of the past. But when physics studies the deep laws of quantum mechanics and thermodynamics, it discovers an extraordinary paradox. The future is not a chaotic roll of the dice, nor is it a completely unyielding script. It operates on a system of structured tendencies, where the universe is wide open, yet deeply guided by mathematical rules. This balanced reality is dictated by the quantum concept of probability waves. If you isolate a subatomic particle, you cannot predict its exact future position with absolute certainty. The laws of nature flatly forbid it. However, the particle is not free to simply vanish and reappear anywhere at random. Instead, its future behavior is strictly governed by a mathematical wave function, a perfect, elegant equation that dictates exactly where it is most likely and least likely to materialize. The universe does not operate on absolute guarantees, but it also completely rejects lawless chaos. It builds the future out of precise tendencies, ensuring that, while individual events remain beautifully unpredictable, the grand tapestry of reality always maintains its structural harmony. The future is not an erratic, threatening storm of random accidents that you must frantically prepare for. It is a highly structured, dependable field of possibilities that knows exactly how to hold itself together. Tonight, you can fully release the exhausting anxiety of trying to predict or secure tomorrow. You have spent your entire day trying to anticipate every potential outcome, desperately trying to manage a future that feels completely chaotic and untamed. But the physics of the cosmos shows us that reality is inherently stable, moving forward through a reliable web of natural laws. You do not need to map out, solve, or control the upcoming days from the confines of your bedroom. Let go of the need for absolute certainty, trust the structured grace of the unfolding universe, and allow your mind to drop into a deep, effortless sleep. The strange stability of chaos. When we hear the word chaos, our minds immediately picture a state of absolute destructive ruin, a violent storm tearing through a forest, a shattering glass pane, or a lawless crowd completely out of control. We treat chaos as the ultimate enemy of order, a terrifying breakdown where all rules, patterns, and logic have been thoroughly erased from the environment. But when modern mathematics and nonlinear physics began studying complex systems through chaos theory, they made a spectacular discovery. Deep within the heart of the wildest, most unpredictable systems in nature lies a hidden, beautiful blueprint of absolute geometric order. Imagine watching a single drop of water falling into a turbulent, rushing river. Its exact trajectory appears completely random, buffeted by trillions of shifting currents and microscopic obstacles. It seems impossible to find any underlying rule governing its movement. But if you map the behavior of the entire chaotic system over a long period of time using computer algorithms, a magnificent pattern emerges. The data points do not scatter into a formless blur. Instead, they conform perfectly to a complex, infinite geometric shape known as a strange attractor. The individual movements remain entirely unpredictable, yet the overall system is permanently anchored to a magnificent, unyielding structure of mathematical harmony. Chaos is not a lack of order. It is a deeper, more sophisticated level of order that our daily minds cannot easily decode. The wild, unpredictable movements of life are quietly held by an invisible framework of perfect balance. You do not need to fear the messy, unregulated currents of your existence. Throughout your demanding day, your mind has been running in frantic circles, trying to eliminate every ounce of chaos, unpredictability, and friction from your routine. You treat every unexpected change as a threat to your stability. But the physics of nature shows us that stability can exist beautifully right in the middle of the storm. Your life does not need to be perfectly neat and linear to be safe. Tonight, you can step down from the exhausting effort of trying to tame the currents. Let the unpredictable details of your day settle into the background. Trust the deeper, invisible geometry of the universe to hold your world in perfect equilibrium, and allow yourself to drift into a deep, restorative sleep. How the universe keeps order by losing it. In our everyday lives, we treat the preservation of order as a process of intense, continuous struggle. We know that to keep a home clean, a machine running, or a routine organized, we must constantly inject physical energy and mental focus into the system. The moment we stop working, dust accumulates, gears grind to a halt, and schedules completely fracture. We view the natural tendency of the world to fall apart as an unyielding enemy that must be actively fought every single hour. But when we look at the grand architecture of cosmic history, physics reveals a beautiful irony. The universe actually manufactures its most complex, orderly structures by using the natural breakdown of energy as its primary fuel. This extraordinary phenomenon is known as a dissipative structure. According to the laws of entropy, energy must naturally disperse and break down over time. But during that very process of dispersal, if a massive flow of energy passes through an open system, it can spontaneously trigger the birth of highly organized patterns. Think of a violent whirlpool forming in a draining sink, the intricate crystal geometry of a snowflake growing in a freezing sky, or the magnificent complexity of a living human body. These structures do not defy the natural unwinding of the cosmos. They are created because the universe is unwinding. They act as cosmic release valves, elegantly organizing themselves to help the universe disperse its energy more efficiently. Order is not a fragile rebellion against nature. It is a natural byproduct of the cosmos letting go. The structures of life are naturally supported by the deeper, unfolding currents of the universe itself. You do not need to exhaust your own spirit to force the world into a state of artificial neatness. Tonight, you can safely retire from your daily struggle against disorder. You have spent your long day tensing your mind, trying to hold every piece of your life into place through sheer willpower, fearing that the moment you relax, everything will collapse into ruin. But the physics of the cosmos shows us that relaxation and release are the very mechanisms that create harmony. You do not need to hold the system together tonight. Let the rigid structures of your day dissolve into a soft, natural equilibrium. Trust the deep, self-sustaining rhythms of your resting body to find their own perfect order, and allow yourself to drop into a deep, effortless sleep. Why the future feels open, but not random. When we think about tomorrow, we naturally perceive it as a completely unwritten, wide-open landscape. We imagine that our lives are a series of blank pages, waiting to be filled by our choices, unexpected turns of fortune, and the shifting winds of happenstance. We treat the future as a space of pure, chaotic freedom, completely distinct from the rigid, locked-in certainty of the past. But when physics studies the deep laws of quantum mechanics and thermodynamics, it discovers an extraordinary paradox. The future is not a chaotic roll of the dice, nor is it a completely unyielding script. It operates on a system of structured tendencies, where the universe is wide open, yet deeply guided by mathematical rules. This balanced reality is dictated by the quantum concept of probability waves. If you isolate a subatomic particle, you cannot predict its exact future position with absolute certainty. The laws of nature flatly forbid it. However, the particle is not free to simply vanish and reappear anywhere at random. Instead, its future behavior is strictly governed by a mathematical wave function, a perfect, elegant equation that dictates exactly where it is most likely and least likely to materialize. The universe does not operate on absolute guarantees, but it also completely rejects lawless chaos. It builds the future out of precise tendencies, ensuring that, while individual events remain beautifully unpredictable, the grand tapestry of reality always maintains its structural harmony. The future is not an erratic, threatening storm of random accidents that you must frantically prepare for. It is a highly structured, dependable field of possibilities that knows exactly how to hold itself together. Tonight, you can fully release the exhausting anxiety of trying to predict or secure tomorrow. You have spent your entire day trying to anticipate every potential outcome, desperately trying to manage a future that feels completely chaotic and untamed. But the physics of the cosmos shows us that reality is inherently stable, moving forward through a reliable web of natural laws. You do not need to map out, solve, or control the upcoming days from the confines of your bedroom. Let go of the need for absolute certainty, trust the structured grace of the unfolding universe, and allow your mind to drop into a deep, effortless sleep. The hidden logic behind uncertainty. In our everyday language, the word uncertainty carries a deeply negative connotation. We associate it with hesitation, a lack of precise data, or the frustrating limits of human knowledge. We assume that if we were only smarter, or if our instruments were sufficiently advanced, we could completely eliminate the fog of the unknown and measure the world with absolute, flawless precision. We treat uncertainty as a temporary human failure. But when physics descends to the bedrock of reality through Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, it discovers that uncertainty is not a limitation of our technology. It is a fundamental, protective mechanism built directly into the fabric of nature. The principle states that it is physically impossible to simultaneously know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a subatomic particle. If you flash a high-energy light to pinpoint exactly where an electron is resting, the impact of that light violently knocks the particle off course, completely erasing your knowledge of its speed. The harder you look for its location, the more elusive its trajectory becomes. This isn't a flaw in our microscopes. It is a law of the cosmos. The universe refuses to be locked down into a single, hyper-defined coordinate. It demands a baseline layer of fuzziness, an unyielding boundary of privacy that prevents the mechanical world from becoming completely frozen and static. This fundamental uncertainty is what gives the universe its vibrant fluidity, allowing particles to move, change, and explore new potentials. Tonight, you can align your mind with this protective law. Throughout your day, you have treated uncertainty as an enemy to be conquered, constantly straining your thoughts to figure out every unknown variable in your life, believing that clarity is the only path to safety. But physics reveals that a lack of absolute definition is natural, necessary, and deeply healthy. You do not need to know where everything is landing or how every problem will be resolved tonight. Let the fuzzy boundaries of your life remain soft and unmeasured in the dark. Welcome the quiet protection of the unknown, and allow your consciousness to rest deeply in the peaceful, uncertain spaces of the night. Why the universe never fully explains itself. We live our lives under the grand umbrella of scientific progress, firmly believing that the universe is a massive, solvable puzzle. We imagine that if we keep digging, keep formulating equations, and keep splitting atoms, humanity will eventually arrive at the final page of the cosmic textbook, a single, elegant master formula that completely explains everything in existence with zero contradictions. We treat reality as an intellectual destination that can be entirely possessed by human logic. But when modern mathematics and theoretical physics encountered Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorems, this dream of a final, closed explanation completely dissolved, revealing that the universe is fundamentally wired to remain an open-ended mystery. Gödel proved mathematically that within any consistent logical framework, including the very arithmetic that underpins all of modern physics, there will always be true statements that can never be proven using the rules of that system. No matter how expansive, complex, or advanced our equations become, every system we construct will inevitably contain gaps that can only be explained by stepping outside into a larger, unmapped reality. The universe cannot be neatly wrapped inside a closed box of human logic, because the box itself is part of the system it is trying to define. Nature is structurally designed to be infinitely deep, ensuring that every answer we uncover will naturally give birth to a dozen deeper, more magnificent questions. Reality is not a finished problem to be conquered, but an endless, self-renewing landscape of wonder that refuses to be completely exhausted. Tonight, you can fully release the exhausting necessity of trying to figure everything out. You often lie awake because your mind behaves like an ambitious scientist, desperately trying to analyze your feelings, solve your life's paradoxes, and force a final, perfect explanation out of your circumstances. But the universe shows us that completeness is a beautiful illusion. It is entirely natural for your life to have unproven truths, unresolved chapters, and spaces that defy immediate logic. You do not need to solve the equation of your life tonight. Let go of the need for an ultimate explanation. Accept the beautiful, unwritten mystery of your present moment, and allow your mind to sink into a deep, unquestioning rest. The final question: what is real without an observer? We arrive at the ultimate boundary of our journey, the deep philosophical shoreline where fundamental physics blends completely into pure consciousness. Throughout our waking lives, we operate under the unquestioned assumption that the physical world possesses an independent, objective reality that carries on perfectly well without us. We believe that if all conscious life were to suddenly vanish from the cosmos, the mountains would keep their shapes, the stars would keep their light, and the quiet room around you would maintain its exact dimensions in the dark. But after crossing through 50 chapters of reality-breaking physics, we are forced to confront the most profound paradox of modern science. Without an observer to witness it, the universe may exist only as a ghost of unrendered probability. In the rigorous language of quantum mechanics, an unobserved particle does not possess a solid position, a fixed shape, or a definite reality. It exists only as a mathematical wave function, a fluid cloud of raw potential wandering through all possible states simultaneously. It is the active intervention of an observer, the conscious measurement, that forces the wave to collapse, instantly materializing the fluid mist into the concrete, solid stuff of our daily lives. This implies that consciousness is not a random accident that evolved on a lonely planet. It is an essential, foundational component of the cosmic architecture. The universe requires your awareness to solidify its borders, and your mind is an active partner in the continuous creation of reality. But tonight, your work as an architect of the universe is officially complete. You have spent the long hours of your day holding the world into focus, observing, judging, measuring, and stabilizing the concrete structures of your life through sheer mental presence. Now, the lights are low, the room is still, and the outside world has faded into a distant echo. You are permitted to finally withdraw your observation. By closing your eyes and letting your thoughts dissolve, you allow the hard, rigid edges of the material world to relax back into a soft, harmless sea of pure potential. The shapes of your day no longer need to be held in place. Let the universe return to its quiet, unrendered twilight. You are safe, you are unobserved, and you are entirely free. Allow your consciousness to let go of the frame, releasing its grasp on reality, and drift effortlessly into the deep, infinite stillness of a perfect sleep.